I'm Brittany. This is Mo Run. And welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch and read gay things. Today, we continue reading Volume 6 of Erha. I get the feeling that we're kind of in for something in this stream, but I don't know. It could be me. I could just be paranoid. It's whatever. But we'll find out, I suppose. We read for a couple of hours. We take a break around halfway through. And we usually get through about 40 to 50 pages. I'm doing my best to just err on 40 because it gives us a little bit extra time. I feel like I don't have to dead run through it as we read. But today, kind of who knows, because the place that we should stop is actually a bit under 40 pages. But then if we read the chapter beyond that, we would get to like 55 or something. So there's a little bit of like awkwardness in that, so we'll just play it by ear. We'll just see what happens and what we feel like and what time it is when we get there. We're on page 47 for chapter 184, which is called Shizun, I Made You Wait So Long. Do you see why I kind of think we're in for it in this stream? A little bit, maybe? Who can say? I don't know. It's impossible to tell. No spoilers, please, in the chat, because there are plenty of new readers here, including myself. I have never read this before. If you have never read this before, and you're just kind of hopping in to see what's going on, I would take a look at the trigger warnings that are linked down in the description. Also linked down in the description is the public Gaywatch Discord, mostly for bookish things, and you can hop on there now. There should be an evergreen invite link down in the description, and you can join the discussion and theorizing of Erha in between streams. You can chat about Erha even more as well if you are a patron over on the Patreon or a YouTube member. Also, Tuesdays and Thursdays before the reading streams at 2:15, we have a little book chat about Erha going on, where we get to theorize in a completely sane and not at all paranoid and deluded manner. I mean, we're pretty good at the theorizing. Y'all are pretty good at the theorizing. They finally figured out that I'm actually Shimei, and honestly, you're not supposed to figure that out for like several more volumes. So they're really on it. We're very serious over there. We're very hinged over in the book chats. So hop on over and join if you're wanting to chat with me more about it. Right now, we are going to begin chapter 184. Shizun, I made you wait so long. Apologies if the audio sounds a little bit different. I'm having to rely on what is basically my backup microphone because my main microphone may have finally given up the ghost. And now I'm kind of in no man's land without a really reliable microphone. But it's fine. What could I possibly have to scream about in this series? I won't be testing this mic at all. Don't worry about it. So, Mo Run came back out of the kitchen in a trice. When he sat next to Chu Wanning, he brought with him not only a heaping bowl of rice for himself, but also a lidded box. Surprised, Chu Wanning hesitantly asked, "Aren't you going to sit over there with Shimei?" Mo Run stared. "Why would I?" We are like 5 lines in for today, Meat Bun. Ease me in, babe. Look who I'm talking to. I'm in such trouble. This response swiftly cheered Chu Wanning. Lashes lowered, he cleared his throat. "I thought the dishes were over there would be more suited to your taste." Spotting the pinkening tips of Chu Wanning's ears, a thought occurred to Mo Run. Could Chu Wanning be jealous? You know, at this point, it's like every single little revelation they have feels like that one moment in season 3 of Hannibal whenever Will finally asks out loud, is Hannibal in love with me? And we all just kind of want to like scream and throw things and be like, huh, you know, that's a really interesting idea, Moran. Could Chuaning be jealous? I hadn't thought about that until right this moment when you thought about it. But you know, now that the idea is like out there, it might not be so crazy. You might be onto something. His heart pounded, a smile spreading across his face. My taste is to sit wherever you are, he whispered. These bitches are going to be so sappy and insufferable when they're finally in bed together. As they deserve. This time, Chuaning's ears went completely scarlet. His knee had been pressed to Mo-Run's, but now, suddenly skittish, he tried to inch it away. Mo-Run refused to let him. Beneath the table, he put a hand on Chuaning's thigh. You... One of the villagers at the table looked over. Xianjun, what's wrong? Chuaning knew he'd misspoken. He schooled his face to calm and said, nothing. Mo-Run hid his smile. Chuaning really was so amusing. It wasn't as if Mo-Run actually planned on doing anything scandalous. That would be a surefire way to bring calamity down on his own head. He simply didn't want any distance between Chuaning and himself. He grabbed Chuaning's leg and childishly yanked it back so that his Shizun's knee leaned against his. Chuaning jerked away again, so Mo-Run pulled him back once more. In the end, Chuaning hit his limit and kicked him under the table, but he stopped trying to move. Mo-Run grinned from ear to ear. There's something wrong with you, Chuaning hissed. They ate. Mo-Run glanced at Chuaning's bowl. As expected, there were a few vegetables and a piece of tofu, while those soup buns had long since been gobbled up by the unruly kids at the table. Mo-Run passed him the little food box of woven bamboo. What's this? Soup dumplings, Mo-Run murmured. I made them just for you. 6 with crab roe and 6 shrimp. Shh, eat up and don't say anything. I knew everyone would beat you to the punch. Chuaning eyed him. It would make him stick out to be the only person eating them at the dinner table. Chuaning was almost too embarrassed to do it. But the sight of Mo-Run's dark eyes, so earnest, and the smudge of flour on his cheek, kept his refusals trapped inside his mouth. The words, I made them just for you, were indeed capable of melting hearts. Oh, there we go with the melting thing again. Chuaning said nothing. After a moment, he silently opened the box and propped the lid in front of him like a screen. With a deliberate furtiveness that only made his actions more obvious, he ate 1 piping hot crab dumpling. Rich broth burst from the delicate skin and warmed his chest from the inside out. Good? Mo-Run watched for a look of approval. Chuaning bit his chopsticks. Not bad. You try one. I've had plenty. These are all for you. Mo-Run smiled, his eyes overflowing with warm light. As long as you like them. Why don't you try a shrimp one next? His attention was completely focused on Chuaning, the streak of pale flour setting off his dark and shining eyes, making him look all the more pathetically adorable. Why would Mo-Run forget Shimei and turn to him? This question still gnawed at Chuaning, but Mo-Run's eyes were so clear and certain they left no room for doubt. In that moment, his gaze had the power to soothe the worries of anyone he bent it upon. After dinner, the village chief invited everyone outside the hall to watch a play the villagers had staged on a platform next to the river. With the clang of copper cymbals and the strum of a Hijinx fiddle, the actors of this humble opera took to the stage. The show was a rowdy one, full of trailing sleeves whirling and painted masks swapping. One actor grabbed the colorful lighter, held the pine sap pipe in his mouth, and tipped his head up with a ferocious puff of breath. Flames exploded across the sky, glinting across the actors' headpieces and winning delighted shouts from the audience. Absolutely fuck this description. What the everlasting hell? Chu Wanning had never enjoyed such theatrics. Firstly, the mortal realm's tricks were unsophisticated. He could identify their mechanisms at a glance, and thus much of the wonder and excitement was lost on him. Secondly, the audience crowded so closely and noisily that he was too uncomfortable to appreciate any of the remaining charms of the stage. Neither he nor Chimay were interested in the show, and after a few moments both turned to leave. Moran said nothing as he followed in their wake. At the last moment, he glanced back once more at the stage. "Let's go," Chimay suggested gently. "If we're late returning, the sect leader will worry." Moran lowered his head and walked after them, but they had gone only a few more steps when he heard Chu Wanning ask mildly, "Do you want to watch?" "They're doing the battle of the bankrollers between Wang Kai and Shichong. It's pretty interesting." Wang Kai and Shichong comes with a footnote. A classic tale from the Song dynasty of two Jin dynasty historical figures, Wang Kai and Shichong, who competed to outdo one another in increasingly outrageous displays of squandered wealth. Ha! He didn't say he wanted to watch it, but neither did he say he didn't. Chu Wanning listened quietly and said, "Then let's watch the end before we go." Chimay paused, slightly taken aback. "Shizun, we've already delayed our return to stay for dinner. If we stay even longer for the show..." "Just this act. We'll go when it's over." "Okay," Chimay agreed with an easygoing smile. "We'll do as Shizun says." I simply can't talk about it anymore. I don't believe it. I don't believe a single word. No matter how on the page genuine it seems, I simply don't. The three returned to the audience, squeezing back through the thronging crowd. Few of the Linyi refugees had ever traveled to Sichuan, and this style of opera was completely new to them. Their swirling sleeves and flashing faces left them clicking their tongues in admiration. Some of the smaller children couldn't see the stage and were either hoisted onto the shoulders of adults or, left to their own devices, crawled over to the edge of the stage, craning their necks to look up. This coral jade tree gifted by the emperor, magnificent in its beauty. The Wang Kai and Shichong up above were showing off their wealth with all their might, huffing and puffing in their determination to one-up each other. 15 miles of purple brocade to line the roads for my return. Who can match that? Great! Do another! The eyes of the audience shone. Village children, having stuffed their sweets into their mouths, clapped delightedly along with the adults. This wasn't the upper cultivation realm, obsessed with outward appearances. Here, no one was dumb enough to watch shows from their seats, sipping a cup of jasmine tea as servants massaged their shoulders and handmaidens waved broad fans. The cool response from beneath those stages would dull even the actor's spark atop their platform, their voices so dry they made the tyrant bidding farewell to his concubine sound like a toad leaving his cricket. The people here were inelegant in their excitement, standing as they clapped. They stamped their feet and raised their voices, crude and noisy. As Chu Wanning stood in the packed sea of people, he was left at something of a loss. Boring people like him would probably rather listen to the toad leaves his cricket in the upper cultivation realm than stand in the throng watching Wang Kai versus Shichong. He wasn't the only one who didn't enjoy this kind of overstimulating environment. Chimay stood for a spell, good-naturedly opting to stay despite the suona? And simples making his head ache. But at the scene with the breaking of the coral tree, a broad-shouldered man nearby got so excited he leapt to his feet and started clapping, sending his neighbor's cup of hot tea splashing all over Chimay. "Hi, sorry, Shinjin, my apologies, look at my clumsiness." "Not to worry, it's fine," Chimay hastily replied. But his clothes were indeed soaked. He sighed and turned somewhat helplessly to Chu Wanning. Shizun, why don't I head back first? I'll get changed and update the sect leader on our assignment. Very well, Chu Wanning said. Take care on the road. Smiling, Shimei bid farewell to Mo Run and left on his own. I really can't give Shimei a fair shake. I really can't. Because at first, when he was like, oh, why don't we go? Why don't we just leave? We don't have to, we need to get back. We have reasons to be back. We should get back. It's all like, why are you trying to keep him from spending time together in this lovely romantic atmosphere, Shimei? But then once he was like, oh, no, sure, that's fine. We can stay. And then we stay. And then someone like spills his tea on him. And he's like, why don't I just go back alone? First of all, you're just dying to get back there for some reason. Second of all, now you're like going back alone. Did you make the guy spill tea on you and we just didn't see that? Because we're still believing that you're like a good person so that he could get off alone? Because he maybe he doesn't care about them spending time together really at this moment, or maybe he has something more important to go off and be a part of doing something nefarious. I really can't, he can't win. He can't win with me. He really can't. If he wants to leave, suspicious. If he wants to stay, suspicious. Chu Wanning thought his method of escape quite effective. Perhaps he should bump into someone too and find an excuse to flee this exuberant crowd. Shimei couldn't possibly just be an introvert who hates big crowds and just wanted to leave because he just didn't like being here. No. This is just another little point on his long, intricate web of nefarious deeds. He was deep in thought when he heard another burst of excited cheering. On stage, the Wonkai actor was in an apoplectic rage, mustache huffing with each breath. With the fire bag in his mouth, he spat a long tongue of flame toward the river. The water's surface roiled, its ripples dyed a blazing orange. Whoa! Again! Do it again! Chu Wanning was silent. He didn't understand what everyone found so thrilling about this. If Shui Meng were here, he wouldn't need any fire bag to throw hundreds or even thousands of flames. As Chu Wanning's interest waned, he caught Mo Run's smile out of the corner of his eye. Mo Run was so tall he had no need to strain on tiptoe. He stood calmly where he was, and no one could block his view. His handsome face was illuminated by the light of the fire, his dimples deep and his gaze gentle yet shadowed, as if inscrutable thoughts moved in their depths. Sensing Chu Wanning's eyes on him, he turned, beaming more brightly. His dark eyes seemed almost to glimmer, but perhaps Chu Wanning was mistaken. When I was little, I always tried to eavesdrop on this opera outside the theater. Every single time, the manager would chase me off before I got to the end. Mo Run's voice was slow and measured. This is the first time I've heard the whole thing. Shizun, do you like it? Chu Wanning couldn't answer. Gazing into Mo Run's eyes, all he said was, it's not bad. Mo Run's smile unfolded, and the very night seemed to brighten. I just gotta sit here for a second. Another song rang out from the stage as one act ended and the next began. Brows dark as smoke, the riotous headpiece quivering. My king has met his end. How could this humble concubine think of life? Oh, see, I'm too fucked up from that previous. I didn't take a big enough of a break. I'm still too fucked up. Okay. Oh, its tyrant bids farewell. Mo Run glanced over at the stage, then smiled. Let's go. The battle of the bankrollers is over. I've had my fill. We can head back. Let's stay a little longer. It's not boring. There's no harm in watching a little more. He wants him to stay to the end. He wants him Mo-run's brows rose slightly in surprise. Okay, he grinned. Scenes from... See, like, I have no idea what this says in a grandiose scheme of things. However, we do have... What is happening here is Chimay didn't like it. Didn't like the play, didn't like being around the crowd, didn't like it, and found a way to get out of Dodge. Chuaning doesn't like it and is staying because it makes Mo-run happy and it's something Mo-run needs to see. And Chuaning took 2 seconds to understand that about Mo-run, where Chimay booked it. I don't know what that means, but I know what it means, you know? Scenes from Tyrant Bids Farewell, White Snake, The Nail Murders, and Water Margin played before them one after another. Kind of want to know what The Nail Murders is about. It's not the point. Not a single person left the audience. Their excitement grew with each performance, every upturned face bright with interest. An old man recited the words along with Grandma Yan's actor on stage. Kind words are warm for 3 winters long. Cruel talk brings 6 months of cold. I wonder if that's thematically relevant to this story. And at the act's climax, when Song Jiang lashed out to kill, the entire hall whooped and hollered, the applause nearly drowning the voices of the singers on stage. A drunken villager jostled Chu Wanning with a grin, clapping him enthusiastically on the back. Chu Wanning had nowhere to retreat to, and he couldn't berate a villager. As he fretted over this dilemma, oh, dear God in heaven, art. Art. Okay, art. Art. What even... Did I finish the sentence? I don't think I did. As he fretted over this dilemma, warm hands clasped his shoulders. Chu Wanning turned to meet Mo-run's eyes. Somehow Mo-run had come to stand behind him. He pulled Chu Wanning closer with a grin, shielding him from the press of the crowd. Seems like the right moment to actually show the art here. And then there's this. The lanterns. You had to give me the lanterns? You really just couldn't take it easy on me for a change? You had to pile lanterns on top of this moment. That's fair. Sure. Click everything back to normal. All right. For a moment, the din of the crowd and the crash of the cymbals seemed far away. Chu Wanning's ears burned. He held Mo-run's gaze for a flash before averting his eyes, unwilling to look at him. But the body behind him was like a blazing flame, and the man's breaths were searing. That sturdy chest pressed against his back, those fine-boned hands encircling his shoulders. As the drum beats quickened and the fire breathers did their work, the crowd's attention went to the stage. Cheering and whistling, the audience's applause was a sharp staccato. In an effort to hide his embarrassment, Chu Wanning moved to half-heartedly clap along with the rest. Before he could raise his hands, Mo-run had drawn him into a full-body embrace. Perhaps he thought no one would notice in the crush of the crowd, or perhaps a boisterous atmosphere intensified his desire to be close to his beloved. Close enough to meld into one, flesh and blood mingling. Whatever the reason, Mo-run lowered his lashes and held him close, wrapping sturdy arms around him. Chu Wanning thus caged in his embrace, he turned his head and, in the instant the flames from the stage lit up the night, kissed Chu Wanning's earlobe. The fire licked up into the sky, illuminating the faces of the actors and igniting its watchers' hearts. "Thank you for keeping me company," Mo-run whispered into his ear. His voice was a low rasp, surpassingly gentle. "I know you don't actually like it." You're overthinking. I like it fine. Mo-Run chuckled and fell silent. But he held Chu-Wan-Ning tighter, his chin coming to rest on his shoulder. As the flames danced, the question rose again in Chu-Wan-Ning's heart. Mo-Run, why did you... Amazing! Someone shouted from the crowd. Chu-Wan-Ning's voice had been soft, and his words were completely swallowed up by the cheering throng. What? Mo-Run asked. Nothing. Chu-Wan-Ning covered his flush with a scowl of displeasure. He didn't want to ask a second time. Asking once had already exhausted his resolve. He was too embarrassed, and refused to speak again. Mo-Run was still for a moment. He really hadn't heard what Chu-Wan-Ning asked, but he suddenly said, The one I like has always been you. Chu-Wan-Ning's heart pounded. It's always been you. I was just too stupid to figure it out. It's not like he was dumb. Oh my God, thank you so much, Annie. Why aren't we holding hands? We're almost to the end of the chapter. I don't care. We're holding hands. His heart beat a relentless rhythm, loud enough in his ears to drown the cymbals clanging on stage. I'm sorry. Chu-Wan-Ning was silent. I made you wait for so long. Longer than even Chu-Wan-Ning knows. Chu-Wan-Ning's eyes were dazzled by flame and smoke. His ears rang with clashing echoes. He couldn't hear a thing. The world was spinning. He didn't know whether his feet were planted on the ground or drifting on a cloud. All he knew was that the person behind him was real and tangible. The breeze never used to have a color or a presence, but now it had become Mo-Run's scent, drifting past the tip of his nose. He had never wanted any lengthy explanation. All he wanted was this simple acknowledgement from the one he loved. To so abruptly receive it turned everything around him into a whirling kaleidoscope of color, the oil paint intensity leaving him unable to think or move, dazed beyond hope of recovery. It's the end of the chapter. We're on page 59 for chapter 185, which is called Shizune Gets Caught Red-Handed. We're just supposed to move on from this. We're just supposed to read the next. Okay. When he returned to his senses and could finally comprehend his surroundings, Chu-Wan-Ning fuzzily realized they were no longer in that thronging crowd. Secreted in the nearest copse of trees, they were kissing passionately. Why aren't we still holding hands? Nobody fucking move. Okay, hang on. I'm sorry. Nobody move. What do you mean he gets caught red-handed? I literally just lost my spot. Wait, whoa. Okay, 0 to like 120 miles an hour. Where the fuck are we? 59. I'm getting there. I promise. I'm running. I'm sprinting. I could not be flying any faster than I am in this moment. Okay. Everybody shut up. Nobody move. Nobody breathe. We're holding hands. That's all we're doing. We're gonna start that sentence again. Secreted in the nearest copse of trees, they were kissing passionately, panting hotly as their mouths opened to one another with a searing thirst. They had craved each other for so long. Their kisses were without care for technique, urgent, impatient, even frantic. Their throats bobbed as they swallowed, their mouths meeting with such bruising need that they drew blood, but neither of them noticed. Neither of them could stop. Chuaning is like this. Like we could guess, because it's always the quiet ones, but like, I'm and see, no matter what they do, they're gonna get caught, unless she means getting caught doing something else, which I don't think she does. But listen. Mo Run had Chuaning shoved against a tree, the rough bark digging into Chuaning's shaking back. There seemed to be string music in the distance, but it was unimportant. All other sounds, whether near or far, high or low, were broken and shattered. The only noises that came with clarity were those of their rough breathing, their lips and tongues tangled, shamelessly entwined. Shamelessly. The way I was literally about to repeat that, and then the text did it for me. Chuaning stubbornly refused to let Mo Run lead. But he'd ever been abstinent, and Mo Run's unleashed desire was vivid and terrifying, like a ferocious beast baying for his blood, lunging to tear out his throat. He didn't know how he'd become like this, or how they'd gotten this far. He didn't know whether this was right or wrong, or what would happen next. In the present moment, this rule-following, ascetic, restrained, and lonely man, who always planned his next 100 steps in advance, seemed to have been wholly ravaged. All that remained was his bone-deep obstinance, his supporting driftwood amidst the choppy seas of desire. He refused to show vulnerability or weakness. Even if his spine was prickling and his soul was dissolving, he'd still rather throw himself forward than be a limp plaything, ripe for the plucking. Alas, though he had ambition enough, his skills left much to be desired. So much so that Mo Run's mouth was soon scraped raw. Chuaning didn't mind his strength and bit the tip of Mo Run's tongue, filling his mouth with the tang of blood. So much so that his breaths came quicker and his face flushed redder. Every inhalation became difficult. In the end, Mo Run had to laugh. He found Chuaning, who was doing his best but whose skills were awful, perfectly adorable. His cold, hard heart had melted, becoming a rippling pool of spring water, an endless expanse of lake that glimmered with golden waves, soft as flowing silk. When they parted, a gossamer thread of spit connected their mouths. Their lips were red and wet, their eyes shining with tenderness and desire. Mo Run's voice was thick with arousal. He stared down into Chuaning's eyes, the rough pads of his fingers caressing Chuaning's cheek. Chuaning knew his technique was so poor it could make one's hair stand on end, but he refused to admit it. Narrowing his eyes, he asked, caustic, "What are you laughing at?" Mo Run didn't answer, eyes sparkling with amusement. Chuaning's temper flared. Was I not good? These words coming out of this man's mouth. Mo Run's mirth finally showed at the corners of his mouth. He embraced Chuaning once more, this time face to face. With two equally angular men holding each other, it wasn't as seamless as an embrace between a man and a woman, but this friction created sparks that were brighter, cinders that burned even hotter. Not at all. You were great. Mo-Run nuzzled the top of his head, then whispered into his ear. Shizin is the best. Then why are you laughing? But Mo-Run only chuckled again. His chest was blazing hot and hard, but his heart was soft, gentling to a warm glow. Laughter isn't the only reaction I'm having. It took Chu Wanning a moment to grasp the implication. There's a joke about grasp in there somewhere. As Mo-Run pulled him closer, as they went from merely embracing from the waist up to having their whole bodies entwined, he sensed this man's threatening, ferocious desire hard against his skin, straining in time with their breaths. The sensation was so sharp, so intense, that his scalp prickled and his heart beat faster. He shivered despite the heat as his throat tightened and his mouth went dry. Chu Wanning abruptly remembered how domineering, how strong, and how ruthless the gentle-looking man before him actually was. He remembered that his blood and flesh were both life-threatening and soul-destroying. Chu Wanning broke out in goosebumps. He suddenly wanted to push Mo-Run away, but before he could raise a hand, Mo-Run's hot mouth had captured his once more, catching his lips between his own and sucking. Every breath was an inferno. With every rise and fall of Mo-Run's chest, his body pressed against Chu Wanning's through their clothes. Chu Wanning could hardly think past the terrifying urgency of it. Mo-Run's tongue invaded his mouth, kissing him hungrily, drunkenly, grinding against him. In the end, there was nothing in Chu Wanning's head but a vast blank. Even his legs were numb. He shivered at those sensations, at that unfamiliar weakness, at the heat and hardness, at that scalding tide of passion. That night, Chu Wanning had no recollection of returning to Xisheng Peak. This poor man is getting banded about, too gay to realize when he's moving and where he's moving. He's just at places now. He felt wooden, mindless. The only thing he remembered was how they had embraced, panting in the dark before parting at the Red Lotus Pavilion. They'd kissed for a long time, wanting nothing more than to swallow their beloved along with their lust. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Also, if they're not caught then when the heck are they caught? Wait. Or is Shizin, by getting caught red-handed, do we mean in the haze, he remembered Mo-Run quietly calling out to him, asking Chu Wanning to let him spend the night in the Red Lotus Pavilion. Chu Wanning must have used the last of his lucidity to collect himself, gasping for air as he refused. He wasn't sure why he said no. Perhaps out of an inexplicable sense of pride, or a discomfort born of having been alone so long. Or perhaps it was plain stubbornness, or that he found all of it absurd. This new development was tempting, but it had come on far too quickly. Having found a reprieve from lust, a reprieve from Mo-Run, Chu Wanning pushed open the pavilion doors. As he walked inside, he understood for the first time what it meant to be afraid of even turning his head. He knew his bowstring had already been drawn to its limit. If he turned around now, he'd lose all control, desire spilling past the dam. Never again would he have the will to push away the man before him. They would both be reduced to ash, leaving nothing behind. When he went to bathe and get changed, Chu Wanning discovered his underclothes were damp. That musky scent made his face go scarlet. He didn't know what to do. Even those sharp phoenix eyes were red at their tips, blushing the soft red of high-tongue flowers. He stood there in a daze for a long interval, helplessly thinking, how did this happen? How did it come to this? All his life, he'd never lost control or been moved like this. Never. Fuck. What was he supposed to do? In the past, whenever Chu Wanning faced a difficult problem, his first recourse was to seek the answer in books. Thus, he had always been widely read, his mind stuffed full of all sorts of texts. Now, for the first time, those countless scrolls were of no use to him. He was caught unprepared. He didn't know a thing about what he should do or how he should respond. Thankfully, Mo Run knew him all too well. After Chu Wanning's first refusal, he realized how lost and anxious Chu Wanning was, and he didn't press him for more. But the intimacy they shared was no longer limited to clasped hands. They kissed passionately in the alley behind Mungpo Hall and nuzzled, whispering in each other's ears in the dead of night in some deserted forest. Mo Run wasn't one for sweet nothings, and sometimes he only spoke when Chu Wanning asked a question. But his eyes were eloquent, filled with every endearment and tender emotion. He was just too dumb to express them, or express them well, at least. Mo Run often chose action over speech, and for some reason Chu Wanning felt Mo Run had an uncanny knack for sensing his wants. They'd shared their feelings mere days ago, but sometimes Chu Wanning had the impression that Mo Run had already spent many, many years by his side. As the weeks passed, they spent more and more time kissing, but it became less and less effective at dampening those flames of desire. Yeah. Oh, honey. They were insatiable, their blood running hot at each parting. And you know Mo Run is going absolutely fucking insane. Mo Run's going nuts. But he's being respectful. This posed little problem for Chu Wanning. He'd followed an ascetic cultivation path for many years, and was possessed of exceptional strength of will. Mo Run was a rather different story. He cultivated a method entirely different from Chu Wanning's, and he was young and red-blooded. He had to wait before standing, after almost every one of their rendezvous. It was too obvious otherwise. His clothes couldn't hide it all. Someone was bound to notice. He was enduring too much torment indeed. One particular evening, the two had snuck off after dinner to tryst in a deserted area for most of an hour. All the elders were to meet later that night. Considering the time, Chu Wanning decided it was getting late and told Mo Run he had to go. But when Mo Run considered the time, he felt they still had plenty and refused to let Chu Wanning leave. Mo Run's method of refusal was rather crude. He said not a word, but simply kissed Chu Wanning again. Several large, abandoned garden stones were scattered throughout this part of the forest. Mo Run was sitting on one, holding Chu Wanning on his lap so they were face to face. Most people in Mo Run's position would find themselves looking up at their partner. But Mo Run was so tall that he and Chu Wanning were the same height like this. He wasn't disadvantaged at all. Asking purely for science. There wouldn't be art of this, would there? Asking for a friend. Purely academic. Oh, I knocked myself so far off course. I'm a little delirious. I'm not doing well. Like I'm reading and I'm enjoying myself as always, but I am like so thoroughly fucking ill at everything that is happening that if I stopped to explain it, we would be here, me speechifying for the next hour and a half, and we wouldn't get anything read anymore for today. So I'm just having to full steam ahead. But this is how they get caught, right? If they're sneaking around into every corner they can find and just making out, this is how they get caught. Okay. At some point, we imagine. Their searing kisses continued as Mo Run's mouth moved from Chu Wanning's lips to his neck. When he nipped at Chu Wanning's throat, the sound of Chu Wanning's low panting awakened new desperation, as if Mo Run's heart had been set aflame. Chu Wanning couldn't bear it either. He wanted to struggle free, to leave, but his limbs were soft, and his legs wouldn't obey his commands. Mo Run had been very fond of this position recently, because he could hold him so close. As dizzying tension stretched between them, Chu Wanning could imagine how thrilling this scene would be without their clothes in the way. Perhaps they'd really reached the precipice. Even the most fervent kisses weren't enough to sate their desire. Each one added fuel to the fire, stoking the flames higher and hotter. When Mo-Run finally let Chu Wanning's lips part from his own, his eyes were wet and his breathing was rough, the jet of his throat bobbing sensually. He stared at Chu Wanning with a single-minded intensity, as if he wanted to say something, but he never did. He merely bit viciously back down. And it was indeed a bite, teeth and all. Chu Wanning found it both painful and stimulating, like the quivering ink of a needle inserted precisely into the acupoint. This bitch and her goddamn analogies. Mo-Run was bound by his love. Broken noises issued from his throat as he embraced the man in his arms, caressing that fall of inky locks. His Shizun was so good. He only wanted to show him the most tender, true-hearted adoration. At the same time, his Shizun was so enticing. He only wanted to viciously, forcefully bully him. In the still evening air, his primal breaths came heavier and heavier. Closing, trembling lashes, Chu Wanning tilted his face up. It felt awful. These embraces and kisses were not nearly enough. He was in distress, to say nothing of the young man holding him. The ends of Mo-Run's eyes were crimson and mist-dampened. "Shizun," he said, voice low and hoarse, filled with an enduring hurt. Chu Wanning said nothing. "Please, I can't take it anymore." What would he do if he couldn't take it anymore? Chu Wanning thought of those fragmented dreams, and a shiver ran up his spine. He made no sound, but his ears had gone scarlet. What would Mo-Run do if he couldn't take it anymore? Before Mo-Run captured his slick and swollen lips once more, Chu Wanning said softly, nearly inaudibly, "Then, not here." Not here meant there could be more, as long as it was elsewhere. Mo-Run's head shot up, shock and delight mingling on his features. He pressed yet another ferocious kiss to Chu Wanning's lips, then stood, scooping Chu Wanning up in his arms. The shame of it ran through Chu Wanning. "Put me down," he snapped, furious. Mo-Run set him down, but didn't forget to kiss him. Where does Shizun want to go? Before Chu Wanning could answer, a rustling came from the bushes nearby. Stunned, his mind cleared, and he shoved Mo-Run away. In the moment they separated, they spied someone walking toward them from the depths of the bamboo forest. The lantern in the newcomer's hands swayed, and his robes fluttered in the breeze after a long beat of silence. Fluttered in the breeze. After a long beat of silence, a voice rang out. Although he seemed to be trying to hide it, it was full of surprise and confusion. "What are you two doing here?" "You're not going to tell us who it is? That's just how the chapter ends. We don't know who it is. Although, hang on. I am deliberately covering the page of the next chapter, so reading this is weird. Although he seemed to be trying to hide it, it was full of surprise and confusion. Yeah, so that's some genuine surprise that whoever it is he's trying to suppress. If it's, oh God, why am I blanking on his name? Daddy in some instances. Shui Jingyong? If it's Shui Jingyong, I'm leaving. I am fucking leaving. It's also, oh my God, it's almost 4. Listen, This is gonna hurt me as much as it hurts you. But it's almost 4. And if we keep reading now, who knows when the break will come. So we're taking the break now. I hate everything about this. We're on page... God, do I even want to know the chapter title? Is that gonna reveal us some... Okay, we're on page 67 for chapter 186. Oh my god, it's called Shizun. Mung Mung is so gullible. Ha ha ha. Is this Shui fucking Mung? Has he just walked in on... Okay. We gotta go take a break. But that's the chapter we're coming back to. We're going to gaslight Shui Mung into not seeing what he saw. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. Please enjoy the Gaywatch break room. And we'll be back for the second half here in just a little bit. Okay? All right. Fantastic. Hello again. So we are picking up with, I'm presuming, Shui Meng walking in. on these guys, only to be promptly convinced that he didn't see very much what he saw. As we flip to the page, also, yes, please, kind of, we're generally spoiler averse, place. We really try to protect people's experiences should they not want spoilers. So in addition to no spoilers for Erha, very obviously, there is generally a no spoilers kind of for anything. No spoilers in general. We like for people to, like, it's one of those things. Both are fine. Some people don't care about spoilers and some people care about spoilers. And the only way to make everyone happy is if we kind of inherently care about spoilers so that everyone gets the experience that they would like. And so if you accidentally threw out a spoiler or tossed out a spoiler, like, it's okay. I don't think I've ever said anything about general spoilers in the chat at all. It's fine. Don't, like, jump down people's throats. And I don't think I even saw people really jumping down people's throats. But yeah, so we're very spoiler free around here. And I really don't think I'd ever said that before. So this seemed like a very good time to just bring that up real quick. We are on page 67 for chapter 186, which is called Shizun Mung Mung is So Gullible. Okay. All right. So, the newcomer's features were exquisite and haughty, his limpid eyes wide with shock in the lantern light. Shui Meng! Chu Wanning froze. He had no idea how much Shui Meng had seen or heard. Mo Run was the first to break the silence. I had something to discuss with Shizun. Shui Meng narrowed his eyes. He had been passing by when he heard suggestive panting coming from this section of the forest and figured it was a pair of depraved and misguided disciples trysting in the backwoods. He was so close. Honestly, it wasn't any of Shui Meng's business. This is true. None of the 10 great sects, save Wu Bei Temple and Shangqing Pavilion, explicitly forbade romantic relationships or dual cultivation. Xishang Peak had a rule against debauchery, but that was meant to forbid frequenting brothels or partnerships that violated social norms. But Shui Meng was Chu Wanning's disciple, after all. His very first disciple. All these years, Shui Meng had held up Chu Wanning's every word and action as a standard for himself. Since Chu Wanning disliked public displays of affection, Shui Meng mindlessly followed him in disdaining cultivator pairs and dual cultivation couples. The mountain's backwoods were a crucial area where the barrier to the ghost realm was thin. For two people to get cozy in such a place, did they lack all sense of decorum? Indignant, Shui Meng had stomped over in a huff, lantern aloft. He would never have imagined the couple caught in the halo of light would be these two. Shui Meng was thunderstruck, so much so that he failed to properly greet Chu Wanning before blurting, "What are you two doing here?" The barrier here was solid. It wasn't in need of repair. There were no spiritual plants here, nor any scenery worth looking at. It was far out of the way, so an idle stroll couldn't possibly have brought them here. Under normal circumstances, if one were to ask Shui Meng, suppose there were two people who, in the dead of night, refused to walk on the broad and bright main road, chose not to sit in the beautiful and scenic back garden, but instead insisted on talking somewhere impossibly secluded. Young master, what would you think? Shui Meng would certainly scoff. What kind of talk are they having? Dirty talk? If one then continued, both are unwedded men who've known each other a long time, equal in looks and status. Young master, what kind of relationship do you think they share? Shui Meng would definitely roll his eyes. What kind of relationship do you think they share? They're clearly a pair of cut sleeves. Snipping away. Disgusting. We drink for cut sleeves. And if one pressed on with, young master, you're incorrect. These two are actually master and disciple. Young master, please refrain from unseem. Odds were Shui Meng wouldn't let them finish the sentence before slamming his hands on the table and bolting to his feet. What nonsense! How could that be? Where are these immoral beasts? I'll kick them through the mountain gates and chase them off Xisheng Peak. But if he were told that said disciple was called Mo Wei Yu and the master was Chu Wanning, then, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Shui Meng would pause, his complexion flickering through a rainbow of colors before he sat, palm pressed to his forehead. Forget everything I just said. Start over from the beginning. I'm sure there's another explanation here. Which was all to say, Shui Meng would never, could never, associate Chu Wanning with anything dirty, inappropriate, or immoral. He swiftly assumed he must have misheard, but he still felt bewildered, mumbling to himself, "What kind of conversation do you need to have here?" I love how Shui Meng's just going to gaslight himself. We don't need to worry about, purposefully and willfully misrepresenting reality in order to make somebody believe that something is real when it's not. We don't need to gaslight him. He'll gaslight himself. Chu Wanning opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Mo Run squeezed his hand under his wide sleeve, cautioning him to silence. Chu Wanning's lies couldn't fool the 3-year-old. It was better if Mo Run did it. Mo Run said, "At dusk, I saw..." I can't speak. I can't even repeat the lies. "At dusk, I saw an osmanthus rice cake spirit here." Chu Wanning shut his mouth. "What?" Shui Meng asked, baffled. An osmanthus rice cake that cultivated into a spirit," Mo Run continued, all earnestness. "It was just about 10 inches tall with a lotus leaf on its head. It even had a little tail with a pale blue light shining at the tip." "What kind of beast is that? I've never seen it in any books." It does kind of sound like a Pokemon. "Me neither," Mo Run replied with a smile. "I wondered if it was some long-lost demon that escaped when Rufeng Sek's demon-suppressing tower fell, so I brought Shizun out here to take a look with me." Shui Meng instantly let out a breath of relief. He didn't know why he felt so reassured by this explanation, but the tension in his face eased. Holding the lantern high, he stepped closer to them and looked around. "Did you guys find it?" "No." Shui Meng glared at Mo Run. "I didn't ask you. I'm asking Shizun." "We did not," Chu Wanning said. Mo Run grinned. "That sweet rice cake probably saw Shizun and thought it would wind up as dessert, so it scampered away to hide." After a beat, Chu Wanning snapped, "Mo Wei Yu, do you want to go copy books in the library again?" At this sharp back and forth, Shui Meng's initial unease finally dissipated like mist. He sighed to himself. For a moment, he'd actually thought his Shizun and that scoundrel Mo Run shared some unspeakable secret. How absurd! How impossible! His Shizun was a cupped handful of the purest sacred water in the world. No one could touch or pollute him. "Enough about us. What about you?" Mo Run asked. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking for Veggie Bun," Shui Meng mumbled. "For Mom." Mo Run arched a brow. "The new fat cat?" "The orange one with the striped forehead who won't eat meat and only eats fish?" "Yeah, have you seen him?" Shui Meng sighed, visibly exasperated. "I don't understand how such a fat cat can run so fast. I've looked everywhere a person can look on both sides of the mountain, but I've seen neither hide nor hair of him." Struck by a thought, his eyes widened. "Ah, what if the rice cake spirit ate him?" he exclaimed in alarm. Neither Chu Wanning nor Mo Run could muster a response. Mo Run badly wanted to laugh, but he managed to turn his guffaw into a cough. "That rice cake looked pretty small. It's a demon, but I doubt it can do much. If Veggie Bun ran into it, I think the rice cake should be the one to worry, not the tabby." Shui Meng stroked his chin. He considered Veggie Bun's physique and agreed. "Makes sense. That sounds about right." "The backwoods are dangerous," Chu Wanning said. "Don't go any farther. I'll help you search." Shui Meng hastily waved his hand. "I wouldn't dream of inconveniencing Shizun." "I have nothing urgent to attend to," insisted Chu Wanning. "I'll help with your search. Then I have to go to Loyalty Hall for the elders' meeting. Mo-Run can join too. The search will go faster with 3 of us. Mo-Run was speechless. Chu Wanning was impressively optimistic. Did he seriously think Mo-Run's body was like a flame that could blaze up and go out with a snuff? He was being asked to stand up and look for a cat now? He hadn't even gone soft yet. Noting both the discomfort on Mo-Run's face and how he hadn't moved a muscle, Shui-Mong asked, "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing," Mo-Run answered. "I'm just feeling a little strange. You two go on ahead. I'll join you in a few minutes." Chu Wanning looked at him askance. Only then did he notice the difference between Mo-Run's clothes and his own. Mo-Run usually wore slim-fitting black and gold robes, which cut a striking silhouette. They were well suited for combat, but their shortcomings were becoming clear. When worn without a cloak, any sign of arousal would be obvious. In the dark, Chu Wanning stood in stunned silence. His usually cool face flushed as red as the last rays of sunset falling on the cloudy whiteness of ice. Jesus Christ! Now is the time for perfectly vivid and evocative imagery? Bitter cold and warm light melded, setting the translucent surface aglow with rosy dusk. Fuck you. That's a scene break. After this incident, Chu Wanning refused to fool around with Mo-Run on Xisheng Peak under any circumstance. It was by pure coincidence that things started to get busy around this time. The sects throughout the cultivation realm were restless. Every day Xu Shuanglin lived meant another sleepless night. They sought the help of Tianyun Pavilion, a judicial organization independent of the 10 great sects, skilled at investigating thorny cases. But Xu Shuanglin had acted ruthlessly and left no evidence behind. Even the Tianyun Pavilion master could do little. Near the end of the month, Li Wuxin reached the limits of his patience. He sent out a hero's invitation, summoning the leaders and key elders of sects large and small to Spiritual Mountain for a conference. Chu Wanning and Shui Jingyang were naturally among those in attendance. The last major congregation at Spiritual Mountain had been the competition in which Shui-Mong and Nengong-se had distinguished themselves. In the blink of an eye, the entire cultivation realm had since been turned upside down. The seats that should have belonged to Rufeng sect were barren, and Huohong Pavilion was a shadow of its former self. The newly named sect leader was a junior who couldn't speak without stammering, and sat cowed and silent amidst the crowd. The masters of Wubei Temple spoke every word with care, refusing to touch on the scandals of their previous leader. Remembering a time when all these sects had gathered here in high spirits, Shui Jingyang felt those scenes were from another lifetime. He sighed. On the dais, Zheng She had been selected leader of the 10 great sects responsible for overseeing the entire Nengongshu investigation. He was a night and day away He was as night and day from the previous leader, Nangong Lu, who was never without a smile, courteous to everyone regardless of their status, and careful to never offend. But Jingxi? Practically the moment the assorted sect leaders revealed the results of the vote and asked Jingxi to take charge, he coolly made himself comfortable in what was once Nangong Lu's seat. Nangong Lu had hemmed and hawed before accepting the position, acting out the expected show of humble refusal. Even after he'd taken the seat, he spent a solid hour giving stately speeches, spittle flying as he waxed eloquent about how grateful he was for their confidence, how earnestly he'd seek guidance from all present, and how sincerely he asked for their patience. Zhang Shi spoke 4 words. As it should be. This is bad. That's bad. That's very bad. There's like a top 5 list of things that you don't want in a leader. And entitlement is one of those things. He genuinely said this position should have been his. But that was sect leader Chang, as unhinged as he was rich and sorely lacking in both patience and tact. Shui Jingyang murmured to Chu Wanning, "He skipped out on more than one gathering at Spiritual Mountain, hasn't he?" Chu Wanning didn't pay much mind to these machinations of power. He frowned. "What do you mean?" Ever since Nangung Lu stepped into the position of leader and Ru Feng was recognized as the foremost sect, Jiangxi stopped attending sect leader gatherings. We're going to repeat that because I feel it's important. Ever since Nangung Lu stepped into the position of leader and Ru Feng was recognized as the foremost sect, Jiangxi stopped attending sect leader gatherings. Eyeing Jiangxi, Chu Wanning said, "That man is arrogant. He wouldn't submit to a wastrel." Shui Jingyong felt wronged. I wouldn't submit to a wastrel either. Chu Wanning smiled faintly. "Sect leader, you were merely enduring it. You didn't submit." As they spoke, a member of Gu Yue's sect's retinue bustled over to their table. He bowed, holding out a brocade box. "Oh! Damn. Art. Hang on." Shui Jingyong turned. "What's this?" The attendant shook his head, pointing at his ears, then mouth. He was a deaf and mute servant. Studying him, Chu Wanning noticed this servant was different from the other Guyue disciples. Around his neck hung a silver snake pendant. "Hanlin the Sage?" The servant noticed the direction of Chu Wanning's gaze and nodded several times. He bowed low, lifting the box over his head to present it. The brocade surface was adorned with an exquisitely detailed snake emblem. Shui Jingyong guessed aloud. He probably works directly under Hanlin the Sage. He looked toward Gu Yue's table. As expected, the world's foremost medicinal zongsha, Hanlin the Sage, Hua Binan, was quietly watching them, only his eyes visible in the slice of skin between his hat and veil. What on earth is Hanlin doing here? That's the end of the chapter. What's he doing here? Hang on. There's gorgeous art, though, however. One moment. Look, what is he doing here? What is this? What is he? What? Why? I mean, stunning, beautiful, impeccable entrance, but what is he doing here? What is he doing here? Why is this? What? We are on page 77 for chapter 187, called Shizun, You're My Lantern. Pardon me if you see me moving my arm and shoulder a little bit weird. Something strange in some weird location, kind of in my back shoulder region, is like being tight and pulling a little bit. So I'm having to like move weird to kind of stretch it out sometimes. So if you see me moving weird, it's just I got something minor but annoying going on back there. As Chu Wanning turned and met his gaze, a hint of a smile curved Hua Binan's eyes. He extended a pale hand from beneath jade-green silk robes and gently gestured for Chu Wanning to take the brocade box. Chu Wanning nodded and looked back toward the servant. "Thank you." The servant performed a last low bow and returned to his master. "Yu Heng, you know Hanlin the Sage," Shui Jingyong exclaimed. "I don't," Chu Wanning replied, considering the box before him. "If I did, I wouldn't have spent 2 million gold at Xuanyuan Pavilion for his Tapir fragrance dew." "Then what's this about?" "I don't know either," Chu Wanning said. "Let's open it and take a look." When they lifted the lid, they found 5 multicolored bottles of Tapir fragrance dew sweetly nestled within, along with a letter. Chu Wanning opened it. Its contents were simple. Hanlin the Sage wrote that he knew Chu Zongsha paid an exorbitant price at Xuanyuan Pavilion for the dew, but because he felt it wasn't worth so much, he'd always wanted to present him with another 5 bottles. Unfortunately, their paths had never crossed, so now that he was so lucky as to meet Chu Zongsha at the Spiritual Mountain Gathering, he hoped the Zongsha would accept. "Looks like he wants to befriend you," Shui Jingyong observed. Chu Ning thought a moment. To refuse such a gift would be a slap to the giver's face. He nodded his thanks at Hua Binan from a distance, then surreptitiously passed the brocade box to Shui Jingyong. Delighted, Shui Jingyong asked, "For me?" "For Tonglong Elder," Chu Ning said. "I've always found this Hua Binan rather peculiar. Xuanyuan Pavilion auctions off so many of his medicines every year at prices they don't merit. Does he plan to reimburse every buyer?" "I don't think it's strange at all," Shui Jingyong mumbled. "The prices are high, but they were never as ridiculously high as the bid you made." Chu Wanning's face showed displeasure. "It was a means to an end. What's so ridiculous about it? Anyway, give these 5 bottles to Tanlong. I doubt there's poison in them, but if Tanlong can figure out the recipe for Tapir Fragrance Dew, it wouldn't be wasted." "You don't need it anymore?" Strangely enough, those absurd, vivid dreams had subsided in recent months. So weird. It's wild how they just so happen to go away. He's just not having any of those dreams. It's just the funniest thing how you don't need to dream about something when, like, when you're in its lap. Other than those few days after they'd left Rufeng's sect when he periodically dreamt of fragmented scenes, he always slept soundly. Drinking any more Tapir Fragrance Dew would be an unconscionable waste. Chu Wanning didn't think he needed any more of such fine medicine for himself. The spiritual mountain gathering lasted several days. When they returned to Xisheng Peak, Mo Run was gone. "He's off exorcising demons," Shuimeng said. A faint furrow appeared between Chu Wanning's brows. "Demons again. It's the 19th time this month. They're all escapees from Rufeng's sect's Golden Drum Tower," Shuimeng sighed. "He's already shoved all the ones he's caught into our heaven-piercing tower, but ours isn't as strong as Golden Drum Tower. It's small, and the spiritual stones and talismans aren't as powerful as Rufeng's sect's. If this keeps up, the tower is going to fail before the demons stop coming. Next time Li Wuxin's here, ask him to take some to Bitam Manor," Shui Jingyong suggested. "He can keep them suppressed in their sacred spirit tower." Shuimeng smiled. "That's a great idea." "Guyue can take some too. I heard their star-plucking tower is twice the size of Rufeng's sect's Golden Drum Tower." This idea was much less pleasing. Shuimeng's brows drew together in anger, and he snapped, "No way!" "Why not? I don't like that Zhang asshole. He's super annoying. I'd fill Heaven-Piercing Tower to bursting before I'd give him any demons we caught." Chu Wanning shook his head. This father-son duo squabbled with no sign of stopping, so he turned to leave. He returned to the pavilion to sleep off his travels. As usual, he slept soundly with no disturbance from those old dreams. When he awoke, the setting sun had turned the horizon crimson. Dusk had fallen over half the dome of the sky, leaving only a hint of bloody sunset at the edge of the world. He was hungry, but Mengpo Hall wouldn't be serving anything this late. Chu Wanning straightened his clothes and pushed the door open to head to Wuchang Town for some snacks. But as he descended the long stairs of the Red Lotus Pavilion, he ran into Mo Run, returning from his exorcism mission. Mo Run smiled when he caught sight of Chu Wanning. "Shizin, Uncle said you were sleeping. I thought I'd stop by to wake you up." "Is something the matter?" "Not at all," Mo Run said. "I just wanted to walk with you." So it was a coincidence. This small stroke of luck somehow cheered Chu Wanning. When one was in love, the slightest quirk of shared fate was enough to brighten one's heart. "Where to?" they asked at the same time. Both froze. "You choose." Once again, they had spoken simultaneously. If you had asked me, like 3 volumes ago, if 3 volumes from then, these bitches would be speaking simultaneously, I don't know what I probably just wouldn't have believed you. Chu Waning's hands clenched with embarrassment within his sleeves, clammy between his fingers, and his eyes were dark and warm. Yet his gaze was calm as he watched Mo run. Mo run grinned. Anywhere's fine. Chu Waning was privately delighted. He maintained his aloof demeanor out of habit, but his joy was rich and deep, like a branch of Shifu haitong blossoms with their pale faces hiding vivid petal backs. Let's head to town. Let's head to town then, and get something to eat. He didn't know how to ask. He didn't ask. I'm too simply beside myself. I need to breathe. I need to relax. I can read. This is fine. This is fine. He didn't ask how Mo Run's mission went, or if there were any troubles. Now that everything had fallen into place, he didn't have to. The moment he stood outside those bamboo doors and saw Mo Run's black clothes billowing in the wind, scroll work curling in dark gold at his hems and glimmering in the darkness, he understood that everything had gone well. There was no need for words. They went to Wuchang Town together. In the past few years, Wuchang Town had flourished, expanding from 6 streets to 11, essentially doubling in size. When I first came to Xisheng Peak, the doors here would be tightly shut before nightfall. There'd be incense ash sprinkled in the courtyards, trigram mirrors hanging from the doors, and soul-suppressing bells hanging from the eaves. Chu Waning watched the townspeople striding ahead of them in the glow of early evening lanterns. Aside from the name, this town is nearly unrecognizable. Mo Run smiled. With Xisheng Peak here, it's only going to get better. They walked along the repaved cobblestone street, taking in the dizzying array of stalls. The sugar blowers, the shadow puppeteers, the barbecue and gudong soup joints, all a bustle. Row after row of lanterns swagged across the streets, shining down on the night market's noisy domesticity. Catching sight of the gudong soup stall, Mo Run thought of how he, Shui Meng, and Xie Xini once ate here. He smiled and tugged Chu Waning to a halt. Shizun, why don't we eat here? They have your favorite soy milk. They sat on creaky bamboo chairs. The night was cold, but the cook's face ran with sweat. Mopping at his brow with a bare arm, he sidled up and asked, Shenjun, what would you like? Twin pot, Chu Waning said. 1 pot of clear mushroom broth, Mo Run said. Chu Waning eyed him. Don't you want something spicy? Mo Run grinned and lowered his lashes, voice warm and low. I want to quit. Chu Waning blinked for a moment as it came to him why Mo Run would suddenly choose to stop eating spicy food. It was as if a fish swam through the waters of his heart, bubbles rising to the surface and stirring up with rippling waves. You don't need to. No, I just like to. The more they talk about food, the more I just want to go run screaming into the nearest forest. And I'm in North Carolina. The nearest bit of forest is like over there, across the way a little bit. It's at the end of the page, and I didn't turn it because they're too busy just wiping my brain of all coherent thought. Chu Waning said nothing. I'd like to quit. I want to quit. He watched Chu Waning, thick lashes fluttering as his gaze fell on the man's reddening ears. Beaming, he left the rest unsaid. I want to be just like you. When we eat hot pot, I want both our chopsticks to dip into the same bubbling pot, no longer one red and one white, sharply divided. Mo Run ordered a few other dishes. This stall had no fancy desserts, so he asked for 3 stout jars of soy milk and sat to wait for the food. They were surrounded by diners from all walks of life, young and old, male and female. The steam from the pots curled in the air as the flames from the wok flared, Shouts and drinking games echoed alongside jokes and whispers. Amidst the bubbling steam and delicious aromas, the sounds of the night merged into an endless wash of tenderness. How peaceful this mortal life. How colorful this world. My throat closed on that. She really creates a scene, doesn't she? How peaceful this mortal life. How colorful this world. Before Mo Run turned 15, he'd spent his days starving. He'd never dreamed of such sumptuous food. And even after he'd become Emperor Taishan Jun and stood at the peak of the world, such serenity had never been his. Now, he had both. She just snuck up behind me with a 2x4. The cook tossed the wok, and the fire roared from beneath to cast a coppery gleam over the bare-armed man's torso. Another sprinkle of seasoning, and those burly arms shook the wok and poured out a plate of stir-fry. It arrived at their table steaming. "Fried double crisp," shouted the server. Taishan Jun of the previous life had remained unfazed by the finest delicacies, but for some reason this shout won a laugh from him. He folded his fine-boned hands under his strong jaw. As his thick lashes fluttered, countless bright dots seemed to merge beneath those two inky veils, as if scattered from the waters of every sea, dyeing the darkness with light. "Why are you laughing?" Chuaning asked. "I don't know. I'm just really happy." Chuaning didn't say any more. Thank God I can't take it. But for some reason, when faced with this man's mesmerizing smile, he felt the same brightness in his heart. After dinner, they looked to the overcast sky, dark with the portent of rain. Those beneath it didn't appear to care. They strolled calmly through the brilliant night. As they passed a lantern stall, Mo Run stopped to look at its wares. Following the line of his gaze, Chuaning found the old craftsman carefully papering a pagoda lantern. A similar lantern, already complete, was sitting on its stand. They were river lanterns, meant to float on the water. "Uncle, could I please have that pagoda lantern?" Chuaning didn't ask the price or if Mo Run wanted it. He stepped up and handed gold leaves to the elderly man engrossed in his craft, then passed the lantern to the disciple waiting behind him. "Here." Mo Run was surprised, pleased, and slightly bemused. "For me?" Chuaning didn't respond. With half a jug of wine from dinner still in his hand, he looked around, his gaze falling on the babbling river in the distance, and walked toward the water. The lantern flickered, then burned brighter. The embellishments glittered, festive accents to the solemn little pagoda. Holding the river lantern, Mo Run mumbled, "Every year I've wanted to set one in the water, but I never had the money." "True." Chuaning glanced at him. "You're always broke." Mo Run laughed. The river flowed tranquilly at their feet. Chuaning didn't feel like making his way down the stone steps, so he crossed his arms and leaned back against the railing of the covered bridge. This white-clad Daojong stood with his back to the black bridge pillar, holding a jug of wine complete with scarlet tassel. He leaned back and took a sip, then turned. The red lanterns swinging from the eaves cast their warm light over a face delicate as jade. His features were serene, but his eyes were full of an unconcealed affection as he watched the man holding his lantern, slightly clumsy in his delight. "You little dummy. What's so fun about this?" Still he watched, unblinking, as Mo Run walked down to the river and babbled under his breath to the pagoda lantern before lowering it into the water. Gold-red light glimmered on the rippling waves. Mo Run dipped his hand in the water and pushed, sending the pagoda on its journey. Mo Run stood on the dark riverbank for a long time. There was no festival happening that day. Other than him, no one had put lanterns on the river. There was only that single small pagoda lantern, casting its weak, stubborn glow as it drifted in the cold waters of that endless night. It's imagery as metaphor. Again. Onward it went, dwindling to a dot of flickering ember until it disappeared, swallowed by the dark. Mo-Run stood in silence, his thoughts his own. He watched the lantern until it was gone, until the wide river's surface was lightless once more. The clouds suddenly opened. Rain beat down on the duckweed and on the dark roofs and white walls of the town. The crowd dispersed, shouting, faces creased with laughter. Such rainstorms were rare in winter. The stall workers rushed to cover the tools of their livelihoods with brown oil paper, pushing their carts as they fled in every direction from the driving rain. Chu-Wan-Ning stared woodenly into the downpour. Spring wasn't far off, but it was still winter. This storm had descended with surprising speed. Under the shelter of the bridge, the rain only soaked the edges of Chu-Wan-Ning's hem. When Mo-Run hastily ran up from the riverside, however, he was thoroughly drenched. His clothes were wet and his face was dripping, and even his eyes were gleaming, dark as the night. He gazed at Chu-Wan-Ning, smiling warmly and with some embarrassment. "Dry yourself with a spell," Chu-Wan-Ning said. A deluge like this was no obstacle to cultivators, especially two Zhongshe like Mo-Run and Chu-Wan-Ning. A simple barrier would see them clean and dry to Xisheng Peak. But neither moved to put up such a barrier. They stood under the bridge's awning, side by side, waiting for the rain to stop. But the storm showed no sign of weakening. The world entire was shrouded in mist and falling water, and the warmth and bustle of the night market had disappeared as if the freezing rain had diluted its colors and smeared its ink. "It doesn't look like it'll stop," Mo-Run said. "It's really raining cats and dogs," Chu-Wan-Ning coolly replied. Mo-Run burst into laughter. He turned to Chu-Wan-Ning and said, "What do? We can't go back." Chu-Wan-Ning knew he should answer with, "Aren't you a cultivator? Don't you know how to make a barrier? What do you mean we can't go back?" But for some reason, he didn't argue, nor did he agree. He just looked, face upturned, into the vast night rain. His palms were hot, his curled fingers clammy. Just as he was thinking how to respond, Mo-Run reached over. Chu-Wan-Ning's trembling hands, with their warm palms and their slight sheen of sweat, fell undisguised into Mo-Run's own. Mo-Run looked at him. After a beat, the jet of his throat bobbing, he said, "Shizun, I want to..." The words came to the tip of his tongue. He couldn't quite voice them. But his heart pounded, prickling in his chest. So he couldn't swallow them either. In the end, eyes wet and warm, he spoke a few words, their fervency veiled in a suggestive ambiguity. "I mean, it's raining too hard," he said quietly. "Let's not go back tonight. It's so far, you'll catch cold." Chu-Wan-Ning didn't yet understand. Blinking, he said, "I'm not cold." "Then are you hot?" "I'm not hot either." Breath scalding, chest rising and falling, Mo-Run didn't let Chu-Wan-Ning finish his sentence. He took his hand and brought it to his own pounding heart. "I am," he whispered. The rain beat down on the duckweed, but Chu-Wan-Ning saw flames in Mo-Run's eyes. He saw molten rock and the blazing heat of summer. This young man was so frustrated he was almost pitiable, painfully adorable. His voice was hoarse. "Let's go to the nearest inn, okay? Right now." Okay, so it's 4:47. Hang on. How many freaking Hang on. I gotta count. I gotta do math. I gotta do really rushed gay math. I suppose, if we started now and I stopped fucking around, I suppose. Okay. We're on page 87. for chapter 188, which is called Shizun, I Really Love You So Much. Okay, all right, nobody move. Nobody move. Nobody move. It feels like that this chunk in particular, this stream in particular, has been like even more so. We're almost there. So I would love for this stream to end with, you know, we're not fucking around. We are. Thank you. Beat me to it. We're holding hands for this entire chapter. I don't even give a shit. We're there. My arm is here. We're there. Chuaning's heart juddered. There was nothing stopping them from returning to Xisheng Peak, yet here was Mo Run using an excuse that even he found patently ridiculous to bring Chuaning to an inn. No matter how oblivious Chuaning might be, he couldn't miss Mo Run's meaning. Mo Run was testing the waters, tentatively probing. If Chuaning were to shake his head no, Mo Run wouldn't press him. But if he were to agree, then it would be a tacit admission that he was willing to do what exactly? Chuaning didn't know, and even if he did, he couldn't bear to think about it. He felt his cheeks burn with a heat the rain couldn't allay. He lifted the wine jug by its slender neck, thinking to take another sip, but only dregs remained. The last drop of cool, heady pear blossom white slipped down his throat. He looked at his feet, fingers pale against the jar's scarlet tassel. Mo Run wasn't fond of wine, but he unexpectedly asked, "Is there any left?" "No." "A shame," said Mo Run. Dipping his head, he softly kissed Chuaning on the mouth. "Guess I'll only be able to get a taste like this then." Okay. Smooth. All right. We see you. Pear blossom white wine was pungent and sweet, with a fragrant note of osmet. I can do this. In the year Mo Run turned 30, he drunk it all night long on the rooftop after Chuaning's death. By the end, the wine was bitter in his mouth. From then on, even after his rebirth, Mo Run had little urge to drink again. The flavors had turned to bitterness. He kissed Chuaning's cool lips, tentative at first. They touched and separated cautiously. The rain crashed down, the world a blur. There was no one else beneath the covered bridge, and the storm was like a curtain falling from the sky. Before they knew it, their arms were around each other as they kissed eagerly, their lips and tongues tangling. The mortifying sounds of their hungry kisses were drowned by the pounding of the rain on the beams above. Chuaning's ears were filled with it. The roar of the storm battered his heart like the clamoring drums and blaring horns of war. Where the rain was cold, Mo Run's breaths were blazing hot. His kisses wandered from Chuaning's lips up to his nose, his eyes, the space between his brows. They reached Chuaning's temples, and a wet, rough tongue licked his ear. This kind of stimulation was more than Chuaning could bear. He clenched his fists, every muscle tense, but he wasn't willing to let out a single sound. Pressing closer, Mo Run captured his earlobe and nuzzled the tiny mole behind it, earning a shiver from the man in his arms. In response, Mo Run tightened his hold as though to crush him, as if he wanted to pulverize Chuaning into his body, to meld him into his very soul. "Shizun." His voice was low and hoarse in Chuaning's ear. His address was respectful, but his hands around Chuaning's waist were anything but. This young man had kept a lid on his passion for so long, but now it finally burst, the scalding water roiling. The pot had nearly boiled dry, yet the cook fire was burning hotter and hotter. That agonizing heat tormented him. It tormented both of them. "Come with me, all right?" At some point, Chuaning let Mo Run grab his hand. They ran frantically through the pouring rain. The rain was freezing, but it seemed warm as it landed on them. Neither opened a barrier nor stopped to buy an umbrella. They let themselves be lashed by the rain and wind like two ordinary commoners with not a shred of spiritual energy between them. Chasing a trail of red lanterns swaying in the storm, they ducked into an inn. The receptionist behind the desk stifled a yawn. Given the hard rain and the late hour, he'd likely expected no more travelers to come for the night. When two drenched men charged through the door, he jumped in fright. Mo-Run was gripping Chu Wan-Ning's wrist, his palm hot enough to turn all the rain to steam. He swiped at the rivulets running down his handsome face and said impatiently, "We'll stay the night." Yes, here are keys for 2 rooms. That'll be..." "What?" At 2 rooms, Mo-Run grew more impatient. Throat bobbing, he rapped his strong, slender knuckles against the counter. "No, just 1 room." The receptionist stared, his eyes flitting back and forth between Mo-Run and Chu Wan-Ning. Chu Wan-Ning jerked his face aside. Cheeks burning, he wrenched his wrist out of Mo-Run's grip. "We need 2 rooms," he said. The receptionist hesitated. "If it's too much money," he said placatingly, "1 is fine." "2," Chu Wan-Ning repeated with an air of finality, glaring daggers at the receptionist. "I mean, they don't have to use both." The poor man took a step back, unsure how he had managed to anger this white-robed cultivator standing in the shadow of the first. He fearfully handed over both keys and accepted the money. Chu Wan-Ning slowed his breathing, feigning his usual calmness. Unfortunately, he was soaked from head to toe. At that precise moment, a droplet rolled off the end of his dark brow straight into his eye. He blinked furiously through wet lashes. "I am going to sleep. Get some ginger tea and dry towels before you come up." His words were solemn and dignified. He made sure to take only one of the brass keys from Mo-Run as the receptionist looked on, then made his way up the stairs unaccompanied. He was the picture of sodden virtue. That might be one of my favorite sentences. Mo-Run said nothing, but inwardly he stifled a laugh. Chu Wan-Ning was so thin-skinned. No matter what, he was compelled to go through the motions in front of others. Chu Wan-Ning stepped through the door into a single room with a narrow bed. A glance at that bed and his throat went dry, while his face seemed to blaze with heat. He didn't dare look at it twice. He stood in the middle of the room with the candle unlit, at something of a loss. His mind was a murky haze. This was so absurd, reckless, unexpected. How did it end up like this? How did he end up standing here like this, dripping rain, about to engage in such folly? How did he... The door opened behind him. Mo-Run. Chu Wan-Ning froze, fingers curling into fists in his sleeves. No matter how he tried to stop the trembling that racked his body, he couldn't. Never in his life had he felt so lost and helpless, like a kite whose spool had been handed off to another. His palms were slick, whether with rain or sweat he didn't know. The bar over the door fell into place. All the hairs on his body stood on end at that crisp click, like an executioner's blade pressed to his throat, reeking of iron. Like a predator sinking its fangs into Sorry, there was a glitch in the Matrix. Like a predator sinking its fangs into prey, stinking of blood. Chu Wan-Ning was seized by the sudden urge to flee, yet somehow his face didn't show a thing. "Why didn't you light the candle?" Mo-Run's voice was gentle and restrained, not overly urgent, though somewhat husky. "I forgot." Mo-Run set the wooden tray down on the table and handed him a small bowl, warm to the touch. "The ginger tea you wanted. Drink it while it's hot." He crossed to the window to light the candle. The rain hadn't let up outside, but for some reason the grapevine-carved window was open. From the dark interior of their room they could see the flames of candles in nearby buildings as pinpoints of shuddering light. Mo-Run stood before the open window, next to the delicate crane-shaped candle holder. Against the backdrop of misty rain, his tall figure was refined and upright, a clean-lined silhouette. As he fiddled with the flint lighter, the sweep of his long lashes stood out starkly, like 2 black butterflies. He was a cultivator. He could light a fire with a flick of his fingers, yet he insisted on using the most commonplace method, as any ordinary person might. Calm and steady, he reached for the candle. In the next instant, the wick would catch, and the wax would shed a melting scarlet tear. The flint sparked. As he raised it to the wick, Chu Wan-Ning called out, "Don't light it." Mo-Run turned to him, hands hovering in midair. What? Chu Wan-ning didn't know how to explain himself. All he could do was repeat stiffly, "Don't light the candle." Bewildered, Mo-run stopped. As he watched Chu Wan-ning standing woodenly in the dark, it slowly occurred to him. Even Yu-hong of the night sky would have moments of fear, objects of terror, domains of which he knew nothing. Everyone Mo-run had slept with in the past life, men and women alike, wanted Emperor Taishan-jun to look upon their faces. No one had ever asked him to put out the light. They would rather dispel the darkness with crimson candles, using every trick in the book, every manner of flirtation, to lure him onto the hook. But Mo-run was never snared. Strangely enough, it had all been the same, whether with Rong-ju in the beginning or Song Chu-tong at the end. He had pampered them and kept them around because they looked like Shimei, making such a show of his obsession. It was as if he was putting on an act for someone else. There were a few... But he never liked to look at their faces in bed. He always made them turn away, never kissing or caressing them. Amidst the tedious cadence of bodies colliding, his mind felt clear, as though he might suddenly wake up and realize it was meaningless. He couldn't remember any of those smiling, fawning, climaxing, flushing faces beneath the candlelight. When he thought back on those love affairs, those romantic liaisons, they seemed to have nothing to do with love or romance. It was rather like he had fallen into a mire of chaos, covering himself in filth as he sank, giving himself up to the darkness, wishing for even the gaps between his bones to be stained black. So black he would no longer yearn for the light or dream of impossible salvation. So black it would kill his fantasy of embracing the very last flame he had in this world. That would have been for the best. But despite everything, he couldn't restrain himself. No matter how much he told himself to stop thinking about him, to stop pining after him. No matter how he told himself that life was without hope and the world was nothing but darkness. Even so, in the storm-lashed Wushan Palace, amid those tormentous entanglements, he still extended shaking fingers and closed them around Chu Wan-ning's neck. He pinned him down against the cold tiles on the somber bluestone steps in the courtyard, between the sweat-tangled sheets, on the snow, in the hot spring, even on the great throne, and in the ancestral temple. In the most dignified and solemn places, those places most worthy of respect, he took him while studying his face, mouthing his neck, his cheeks, his lips, chanting his name. He took him apart. Back then, Chu Wan-ning had surely also wanted darkness, had wanted the candles to be extinguished. He surely hadn't wanted any light. But back then, Chu Wan-ning hadn't said so. He wouldn't say so. He wouldn't ask for anything at all. Now that he thought of it, during his 8 long years of imprisonment, Chu Wan-ning had only asked Mo-run for something twice. Once at the very beginning, and once at the very end. The first, when Mo-run had stepped across the threshold of Wushan Palace, was for Mo-run to spare Shui-mong. The second, before he left the world for good, was for Mo-run to spare himself. Why else, unless Chu Wan-ning had lost all hope? Mo-run put down the flint and steel. He didn't speak for a long time. So long that enough tension bled out of Chu Wan-ning's body to ask, voice soft, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Mo-run responded. His voice was warm, throaty, and soaked with bitterness. He stepped over to Chu Wan-ning and put his arms around him, gathering up that solitary figure in the darkness. The damp of the rain lingered on both of them. Holding him, Mo-Run spoke at last. Wan-ning. In the moment of silence that followed, Mo-Run had a sudden destructive urge to tell him everything. But his throat was choked, like a fishbone was stuck in it. He couldn't say the words. He genuinely couldn't make a sound. This warmth right now was far too precious to both him and Chu Wan-ning. His sins and regrets were innumerable, but he didn't want to speak of them. He couldn't speak of them. He didn't want to wake up. He wanted to keep dreaming until daybreak came to slit his throat. That line is on page 94. In the absence of light or flame, Mo-Run held Chu Wan-ning in the darkness, kissing him carefully, slowly drawing him in. The room was quiet, cloaked in a stillness the rainfall couldn't disturb. They could hear each other's breaths and heartbeats, the sounds of their lips meeting and parting, the soft slick noises when they shifted. Chu Wan-ning strove to keep his breathing even, but the heaving of his chest grew urgent under Mo-Run's mouth and hands. Chu Wan-ning himself was a tall, well-built man, but Mo-Run, towering over him, could so easily cage him in his arms. His figure was a broad and imposing mountain as he pressed Chu Wan-ning to his searing chest. Those soft, tentative kisses grew deeper, more searching. Guiding Chu Wan-ning's lips open, Mo-Run's rough tongue licked into his mouth, insistent as a parched man taking a first drink of sweet dew, or a man on fire begging for water to douse the flames. But to Mo-Run, Chu Wan-ning's breath was not fresh water, but pine oil. A splash sent the flames roaring toward the sky. It was unclear who started taking off the other's clothes. Their sighs filled the night, mixed with the soft sounds of kiss after kiss swallowed between lips and teeth. Whether because they yanked open their sashes so hard it hurt, or because the thrum of anticipation was simply too intense, faint moans escaped between the minutes. More frequent were the rough pants of men consumed by desire. Chu Wan-ning's inner robe had been pulled open, and he was still getting used to the cool air on his skin when he felt Mo-Run lean down to kiss his neck, then his collarbone, his lips closing around a nipple wet and warm. Chu Wan-ning gasped for air, throwing his head back in humiliated arousal. He was blushing furiously, but they were fortunately surrounded by darkness. Although he knew Mo-Run couldn't see his flaming cheeks, he said softly, "The window." "What?" Mo-Run raised his head hazily, meeting Chu Wan-ning's downcast, dewy eyes. He had intended to let Chu Wan-ning finish his thought, but this glance was enough to make his scalp go numb. Blood pounded in his ears, and an irrepressible lust washed over him as he leaned in to take Chu Wan-ning's lips once more. He plundered that mouth again thoroughly before finally letting it part from his own. Catching his breath, he snuck in a final peck before asking hoarsely for the second time, "What?" "The window." Chu Wan-ning's heart was racing. He hadn't found the knack of breathing during these passionate encounters. He felt a little lightheaded. "You haven't closed the window." Mo-Run stepped over to the window and shut it, cutting them off from the last glimmers of light outside. The room was plunged into darkness, so the flames of desire could burn all the more brightly. Every drop of Mo-Run's blood was on fire. Bodies colliding once more, the pair tumbled onto the bed, drawing a lone groan from its aged frame. Giving Chu Wan-ning no time to react, Mo-Run pinned him under his body to pull off that last snow-white layer, already askew. He felt Chu Wanning shaking beneath him, not unlike the first time they had slept together in the past life. Tremors racked his body, no matter how he tried to suppress them. Heart sore. Mo-Run cupped Chu Wanning's face in his palm, dropping kisses on his eyelids, his lips, his jaw. He murmured hoarsely into Chu Wanning's ear. Don't be scared. I'm not. I'm not scared. Mo-Run took his trembling hand, lacing their fingers together. His warm breath puffed against Chu Wanning's earlobe as he soothed. I've got you. Good, that's it. You're doing great. Chu Wanning wanted to reply, to fire back a fierce retort. Even if he could only manage a few words, that would be sufficient. But he couldn't speak at all, as though his brain was made of wood. All he felt was Mo-Run's weight on top of him, Mo-Run's calloused hands wandering across his waist, his back. The feeling was so unbearable. He arched his spine against it, inadvertently pressing into Mo-Run's chest. Mo-Run's inner robe had long been stripped away, leaving his sturdy torso bare. It radiated such terrifying, powerful heat that Chu Wanning felt he might melt away entirely. Their sweat-slick bodies twined together, each brush of skin on skin sending sparks flying. Their breaths echoed in the room, heavier and deeper, encumbered by desire. However they kissed, it wasn't enough to quench this incurable thirst. Hazy images flashed through Chu Wanning's mind. Writhing bodies, boneless legs, scarlet canopies, and crimson sheets. The scenes from those dreams came suddenly into focus. Mo-Run was gripping him by the waist, hips ramming against him as he fucked him deep and hard. Whether due to pleasure or something else, Mo-Run's handsome face looked sinister in this dream, a feral glint in his eyes. Chu Wanning was ignorant of sex or romance, and he'd never second-guessed the origins of these visions. He imagined it was human nature that the awakening of desire should provoke such realistic dreams. But Mo-Run knew nothing of those visions. He thought Chu Wanning wholly oblivious of congress between men and women, to say nothing of the ways in which two men made love. He worried he might startle or hurt Chu Wanning, so he caressed him tenderly, moving slow. He didn't want Chu Wanning to suffer in this lifetime. Lust's hold on them tightened as they kissed, hands roaming. Chu Wanning finally couldn't take it. He gripped Mo-Run's fingers with one hand, and the bedding with the other. Cheeks aflame, he longed to reach down and take himself in hand, but how could he do something so shameful in front of the person he loved? He was so hard, the evidence of his arousal straining against his underclothes. Chu Wanning felt mortified. The ache was nearly unbearable. He wanted so badly to touch himself, yet he refused to give in. His narrowed phoenix eyes misted, everything blurring within. Gradually, his awareness faded until he knew nothing at all. Somehow, in his bones, he seemed to understand what he was supposed to do, how two men were supposed to be together. Love and desire filled his breast, and he loved this man on top of him very much. He wanted to dive into the ocean of desires with him, to sink into the abyss of want, and never surface. Scattered visions flitted across his eyes once more, a swirl of dancing colors. How strange. Why did it look like they were on Xisheng Peak, in Loyalty Hall? A spark of realization flickered to life in his mind, only to fade a breath later. He saw Mo Run sitting on the throne in Loyalty Hall, where the sect leader received guests. This was a dignified place, yet somehow he was straddling Mo Run on that seat as Mo Run's arms supported him. He was stark naked, every inch of him shamefully bare, while Mo Run was dressed neatly, save for the front of his pants, pulled down just enough. Even so, whatever he exposed was hidden beneath Chu Waning's open legs. Kissing him, Mo Run canted his hips upward as he stared unblinking into Chu Waning's face. "Does it feel good?" he asked. Chu Waning watched himself shake his head in anguished silence. Mo Run's fingers slipped into his mouth and pried open his jaw, as though to pull the moans from his throat. "That's it. I want to hear you scream." But Chu Waning wouldn't. Only a broken whimper escaped. Mo Run remained fully seated inside Chu Waning. He gripped Chu Waning's waist, then slid his hand down to his ass and pinched it hard. "Go on, then," he demanded, voice a harsh rasp. "No." Mo Run grabbed his ass and lifted him up and down, a slow torture. That maddening friction drove Chu Waning insane. He felt he was about to be run through. "I can't. I don't want to." "Who cares what you want?" The man on the throne laughed coldly. "Aren't you enjoying this? Look, you're hard." In the inn, Chu Waning lay on the bed, dazed and shivering, painfully hard. These sights and sounds came to him as through a murky glass, hallucinations born of his overwhelming arousal. What was going on? What to do? The images smeared, but he could still see Mo Run viciously thrusting into him from atop the throne, pulling out nigh completely before burying himself again. It was too much. In the end, Chu Waning couldn't take it. Sprawled upon Mo Run's lap, he gasped and moaned. Mo Run, too, was panting as he fucked him. Everything was so blurry, he couldn't see. It was an illusion, a hallucination. It couldn't be real, so it had to be fake. It was an overlapping dreamscape, an unending nightmare, yet that overpowering, irrepressible feeling of invasion was so vivid. Was it supposed to be like this? Chu Waning's phoenix eyes were half-lidded, glassy, and unfocused. "In me," he muttered. Mo Run jumped. Chu Waning knew how sex worked? But how? Here was a man who had never so much as looked at erotic pictures, untouched as a sheet of white paper. How would he know? "Is that what we're supposed to do?" Chu Waning haltingly asked the man on top of him, his face so red it could drip blood. Where did you learn that?" Chu Waning couldn't possibly say he had dreamt it. How indecent, how depraved would that make him sound? "I accidentally saw it in the library," he mumbled. "Someone shelved the book in the wrong place," he added quickly. Naturally, Mo Run had no reason to doubt him. Feeling both relief and an overwhelming fondness, he kissed the corner of Chu Waning's mouth, then the tip of his nose. "Don't be hasty." Chu Waning's eyes flew open. Hasty? Who said he was hasty? His head throbbed with fury and embarrassment, but Mo Run was still holding him, chest pressed against his own. He stroked Chu Waning's temples and said softly, "It'll hurt." "Never mind, then," Chu Waning replied without hesitation, eager to save face. Mo Run chuckled, low and mellifluous. "Don't worry about me," he said. "Tonight..." His voice faded. Chu Waning blinked. What about tonight? He watched Mo Run prop himself up on sturdy arms, pulling back to gaze at him from above. Mo Run slowly sat up and shifted down on the bed. Nothing like this had ever happened in Chu Waning's dreams. What was Mo Run going to do? "Tonight, I just want to make you feel good." Before Chu Waning realized what was happening, Mo Run had loosened the ties of Chu Waning's underclothes to reveal his straining erection. His gaze sparked with ardent affection as he leaned forward and took Chu Waning into his mouth. A shudder raced down Chu Wanning's spine as he cried out in surprise, breath running out of him. What was this sensation? How could this be possible? It was so dirty. But it felt so good to have his beloved's warm mouth around him. Mo Run kept his teeth carefully out of the way as he gently licked and sucked. At Chu Wanning's hitched breaths and low pants, Mo Run raised his eyes to gaze at him indulgently. Taehyunjun had never done anything like this. He had never even considered that someday he might want to do something like this, but now he was fully willing, smitten, delighted to do so. How could you... Quick, spit it out. Face crimson, Chu Wanning bit his lip and shook his head back and forth. His phoenix eyes, usually so sharp, showed intoxication and panic. How cute. Mo Run took him deeper in, past his throat. Chu Wanning couldn't bear it. Arcing his back, he tossed his head back, panting for dear life, eyes losing focus. At length, Mo Run pulled away, drool dripping from the corner of his mouth. Eyes dancing, he asked. Babe, do you like it? Chu Wanning felt like a sky full of fireworks was going off in his head. Hearing Mo Run address him like this felt both mortifying and sweet, a combination that made his already sluggish limbs go weak. How could he... He was Mo Run's Shizun. He was so much older than him, and he was the Beidou immortal. Another low gasp shattered the room's darkness. Mo Run's rough, clever tongue lapped at the plump head of Chu Wanning's cock, running along those places Chu Wanning himself had scarcely touched. The sensation was enough to make Chu Wanning weep. He wanted to control himself, but he wasn't guarded or defiant, as he had been in the past life. This time he entangled with Mo Run of his own volition, and therefore didn't resist. His throat bobbed, hoarse cries leaking from parted lips. He closed his mist-filled eyes. When Mo Run put his mouth around him again, this time moving rhythmically up and down, Chu Wanning reached out and buried his slender fingers in Mo Run's dark hair, weakly trying to push him away. Don't do that. That's dirty. But Mo Run only raised his glistening eyes, desire heavy in his gaze. I like you, and I want to do this for you. I want you to feel good. How could it be dirty? He laid a gentle kiss on that achingly hard shaft, lips ghosting over where the vein on the underside stood out. Every inch of you is perfect. Mo Run dipped his head back down to continue sucking Chu Wanning off. Chu Wanning had no experience. He was powerless against this onslaught of pleasure. After all, it was his first time. It wasn't long before he reached his climax, unable to stop himself from bucking up into Mo Run's throat as he came. Surely this was very uncomfortable for Mo Run. Chu Wanning's world was a snow-white haze, all unfocused save for the sharp ecstasy of that moment. He had never conceived of such intense pleasure, to say nothing of experiencing it himself. As bliss threatened to drown him, his mind came vaguely back to what he had done at the very end. He wanted to sit up and wipe Mo Run's mouth, to smooth his hand over his cheek and kiss him, to express his gratitude, but he was sapped of strength, legs numb and tingling. He couldn't get up. By the time he looked up through trembling lashes, Mo Run had swallowed. Chu Wanning's thoughts stalled completely, the back of his neck prickling and his blood pulsing a steady beat. Mo Run pulled himself up and draped his warm bulk over Chu Wanning's still heaving chest, his hand coming up to stroke Chu Wanning's face. His hot, rock-hard erection pressed into Chu Wanning's abdomen, and his eyes were stained red, almost bestial. But as always, his gaze on Chu Wanning was tender. I love you. The rest would be in his head. I really, really, really love you so much. With reckless ambition, with boundless contrition, bearing the weight of my guilt and sins, yet unwilling to give up. Selfishly, desperately, ardently, hungrily. I love you. the end of the chapter. Oh God, I can look at the interior art now. Now I don't have a brain cell. I'm deeply fucking overwhelmed. We're on page. We're on oh God, numbers. We're on page 103 for for chapter 189, which will be called Shizun, You're the Best. That's where we're picking up next time. What the fuck is on this interior art? That's not it. That's just the cover. What the... I'm getting there. Hang on. Who the fuck thought this was okay? Oh God, and Chuaning's just standing there behind him? I was already overwhelmed at the joy on Morun's face. All right. Well, I am without capacity for thought. So I'm gonna go, apparently. We're also running late, but you know, slightly worth it. If you want to talk about this, I'll be here on Thursday at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with patrons and YouTube members to discuss that. So I'll see you on Thursday, either for the book chat at 2:15 or to read more at 3. I'll be here. Wait, excuse me. Hang on. Someone's saying to look at the lantern closely. Before I went, I am already exhausted. What are you telling me? What the... Oh my God! The lantern's even more glorious than I thought. Oh, it's like a two-sided situation. There's an upside down thing and a... No. They're like apart on one end and together on another. You know what? I'm done. I'm going. I'm no longer saying responsible YouTuber things. I'm leaving. So I'll see you guys on Thursday. Okay? Please, for the love of fucking God, take care of yourselves. And I'll be back in a couple of days. Okay? Okay.